Today we're doing my sequence I call the pendulum, and the pendulum is designed to work this bone here and the muscles that attach to it. So this is your femur. It's the name of the bone under here, and it connects here with the pelvis, and that's your hip joint. All of that might already be obvious to you, which is great. And then we have, depending on how you think about it, 4 major muscle groups in the thigh, or 6 if you want to divide it a little bit smaller, which is what we'll be doing today. So as we articulate, which means move the femur, the thigh bone, through, it has 6 articulations, so we're going to do all 6 today. As we do that, we'll stretch the muscles that attach and move the femur. So every time you move it in one direction, the muscle that does the opposite generally gets stretched. That's the way stretching works if you understand biomechanics. So, you know, every movement, a muscle pulls the bone in the opposite direction. One maybe common misconception or misunderstanding about the body, there are no pushing skeletal muscles. So when I lift my arm, it's always something pulling that's lifting the arm. Okay, if I do this with my fingers, there are muscles in here that are pulling the fingers closed. Same when I open my fingers, there are muscles on the other side that pull. So muscles, skeletal muscles only pull. That's it. So the way we stretch them is just by doing the opposite of the movement that they create. So we'll be doing a lot of that today. All right, let's get started. We begin with just a tabletop. This we call the bear pose or marauding bear in yin. It's just a warm-up. It's a yang thing as opposed to a yin thing, so it's active. And you'll see I'm just trying to move every which way. And this is targeting mostly the torso, which today we're not going to do that much with the torso, at least not intentionally. But we still want to, it's not a bad idea to get it warmed up. And then we tuck our toes and do the down dog. And now this is about the legs much more. So let's give those legs a wake up, warm up. All right, now we come to what we call dragon flying highs. So be sure you get the legs right. Left leg forward, right knee to the ground, left foot basically under the knee, and then try raising your torso up and back pretty much as far as it will go. And we're trying to stretch right here. These are your hip flexors. So these are the hip flexors on my right side. So I feel the stretch right there. Okay. And then we're just holding that. And we'll be here for 3 minutes. Now this, for most people, is not a super comfy stretch. So a few things I can mention is if this knee is hurting, then pat it. Put a blanket or a towel or something underneath it. Give it a little extra padding. If you're on a yoga mat, you can fold that mat over a few times. Give it a little extra padding. Okay? We're not trying to torture that knee. We just have it on the ground so that the femur is pulled behind us. Another thing to keep in mind is, again, people sometimes try and do this posture like this. We don't want to do that. Okay? We want that upper body up and back. The reason why you want to do that is what that does is it releases the tension on the hip flexors, which is the muscle we're trying to stretch. So when you come down, you might feel more comfortable, but now you're not doing the posture. You're not stretching the right muscle group. Okay? So if it's a little too much, you can just back your hips up a little bit. Just ease off a tiny bit. Not too much. You still want to feel the stretch, but you can just sort of ease out of that a little bit. We're already halfway through, more than halfway. Okay? And this isn't comfortable for me today either. My massage therapist was working on these areas yesterday. I went and saw him, and he was getting in there into the hip flexors, the psoas, the iliacus, and just, you know, releasing tension in those muscles. I don't think he finished. He was just sort of starting that, releasing those muscles. But these are muscles that very often are tight and angry. If your massage therapist got in there and began pressing on that, you probably feel very, very tender. That's what I experienced. And I stretch a fair amount as a yoga teacher. So your average person likely will have a lot more dysfunction and tenderness. And muscles like to be used. They like to be stretched. They like to be engaged. So part of the side effect of sitting at a desk for work for hours a day is those muscles don't get that. They don't get the love that they want. And so they can become really, really angry, is what I like to say. They just get really sensitive and tender. So this is to help us sort of deal with that. Let's switch sides. Okay, so you can come through tabletop, or you could do a down dog. I'm just going to take this off real quick. All right, same principles apply. Okay, so we're here now. We want to feel on the left side. So massage therapy is a great example of what I'm speaking about. So when we get a massage, if it's a therapeutic massage, if it's just relaxation, I think I'm not super familiar with all the different modalities in massage, so don't quote me on this, but my impression of having gotten massages is that certain styles like Swedish are more or less about relaxation. You're not going to get deep into the muscles. It's not extremely therapeutic. Relaxation can be therapeutic, but outside of the inherent therapeutic value of relaxation, the Swedish, where they're just sort of rubbing on you with oil, might move some lymph, still good for you, but it's not going to help you with dysfunctional muscles that you might have in your body. Neuromuscular massage, myofascial massage, some of these sports massage, these types of therapy, if you do them, deep tissue massage, these types of things, the therapist is going to go in and find what are called trigger points. Now, when you press on a trigger point, it's very tender. It doesn't necessarily feel good, depending on I like it when a therapist finds a trigger point, but depending on the trigger point and what's going on with that muscle, it can be painful. I mean, I've had times when I'm like gritting my teeth. In fact, just yesterday, my therapist was working on my clavicle up here, around my clavicle, some of the muscles in my neck. I've had some neck pain that I've been dealing with. And so he was getting in there. And I mean, it was one of the, maybe the most pain I've ever been in my life. It was really, really, really painful. He said that when he has it done, it feels like someone's taking a knife and just, you know, shoving into his neck. And that was pretty close to what it felt like. So I'm telling you all this so that you understand that this is just the way that healing is and therapy is. And if we think, you know, yoga is just supposed to be relaxing and feel good and I don't have to work or do anything difficult, then we're not going to get as much as we can out of it. Just like if I go to my massage therapist and he's trying to release trigger points and I'm like, ooh, that hurts, stop, right? I would be much healthier long-term if I let my therapist release the trigger points, because then the muscle will function as it's meant to, and then it won't be painful. But if I don't allow that short-term discomfort, then I don't get the long-term benefit and payoff. All right, let's come on out of this. So that was our short-term discomfort. And now we're going to rest, which is important. So this is another very important part of healing and health is rest, whether it's for a few seconds between yoga postures, whether it's a full night's sleep, at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep in the evening, pretty much uninterrupted, deep sleep, whatever it is, whether it's meditation, yoga nidra, these different ways of resting and dealing with stress. It's a very important part of the equation. I'm really realizing how important that is more and more as I study more. I've always known that. It's always been a part of my teaching, but you really want to give that equal weight. Okay, let's bring those legs in. Stretch it out, move around a little bit. So I'm definitely feeling that in my hip flexors there. Not a bad thing. Okay, so stretch it out. And then we'll hinge up, so hands under the hips. This is just creating a little platform. Some people's tailbone hurts when they press it on the ground directly. So we just create a little platform there. And then legs straight up. If there's pain in your back, that's likely from tight hamstrings. So the way you deal with that is you just bend your knees, and that will loosen up those hamstrings a bit. Otherwise, legs straight is great. When we lift the upper body, we engage the rectus abdominis here. And so this is our six-pack, if you will, part of our core muscle group. So we're just going to give them a little work here. We exhale, slowly lower the legs toward the ground. Just before they touch, we pause, inhale, pop them up, and then let the weight of the legs pull you up. And then you're up and seated, okay? All right, half butterfly. Right leg is straight, left foot to the inside of the thigh. And now we're stretching here. These are the hamstrings. And now we're bringing the femur into what's called flexion. Before, we had the leg behind us, and that's called hyperextension. Now, as we come forward, this is called flexion. And again, that will stretch and target those hamstrings on the back of the thigh. Now, feel free to use props. If your left knee is in the air, you don't like that, it's okay if it is, but if you don't like the way that feels, if that doesn't feel stable or safe, place a block underneath it or a folded blanket. You could sit on a block or folded blanket. You can also rest your forehead or forearms on yoga blocks as well, okay? Okay, let's switch sides. Okay, so let's go ahead and unwind from that. Take a short rest again, very important. Then bringing those legs in. Again, the movement here is just to find some balance and relief. So I'm definitely feeling that last posture. Even in my torso, even though we were targeting the hips, it was affecting my back a bit. So I'm going to try and move, and the movement itself just brings some relief. Then, again, hinging up gives us just a little bit of core activation, which helps to stabilize the hips and the spine, which is why we like to do that. So again, rest, stretching, and active muscles. This is, even though the emphasis here is the stretching, we still have a little bit of each. So again, this is kind of the formula that we use to be healthy. We can change the amounts. All right, so let's come into a tabletop now. You might want to scoot over to the left edge of your mat. I'm going to take that right leg straight out to the right, and then take the legs pretty much as wide as they'll go. You can stay on your hands. You can see I'm down on my forearms. Your toes can point in whatever direction you want, whatever feels comfortable. You could be on the inside edge of this foot, or you can try and get that foot flat. Again, that's really up to you ultimately. Your hips can stay over your left knee, or you can press them back toward your left heel, kind of sitting on it, which is what I'm doing today. And this is one of those postures for me that now is very fluid. It used to be that I would do this posture every time I would get a pretty consistent stretch. Usually that means you have a lot of tension in a particular muscle group. That's what that means. If you say every time you have your legs straight, if you bend over, you get a big stretch in the back of your thighs, then that probably means that you have a fair amount of hamstring tension, which is pretty common for most Americans, at least. Anyway, adductors, this muscle group, it's been opening up quite a bit for me recently. These leg muscles, very often you'll find that even though you've been stretching for years and years and years, some of the bigger groups, they can take a long time to stretch out. So I suspect it's a combination of my hamstrings and probably a lot of it's muscle called adductor magnus, which is the dividing line of hamstrings and adductors. So you could call it a hamstring, you could call it an adductor. We usually group it as an adductor. Anyway, I think that that muscle group is starting to really open up for me. As it does, it means it's more and more challenging to stretch it effectively, to give it a big fat stretch, because it's just looser. And I do want to mention here, this isn't the case for most people, but you never know. One of you out there might be experiencing this in certain areas. There is a limit to how far you can stretch the human body. We're all different. So some people, that limit is much further than it is for other people, but we all have a limit. Even the greatest contortionist in the world, there's a limit. And so what we want to do with our practice is go to our safe limit. Now, if you stretch a lot, then that safe limit can change. And that's what's happening to me. That's what I'm talking about, that I have to maybe go a little further to get an effective stretch these days in this direction, okay? But there will come a day, if I keep stretching and my body keeps opening like this, there will be a day when I just don't get that much stretch anymore. Just that nice, satisfying, big stretch that I used to get, I just won't, because it's all stretched out. Let's switch sides. So this side is a little easier for me to get that stretch. Okay. So again, what that means is a little more tension on this side for whatever reason. Sometimes we know the reason, and then sometimes we don't. Sometimes we, it could be the way we sit at our desk. It could be some activity we do, like maybe you play tennis or pickleball, and maybe you favor one side. Most of us have a dominant side regardless, right? You're left or right-handed, and you may not know it, but you're left or right-footed as well. You do certain tasks favoring one leg over the other. Most people do. And so all of that can create these types of imbalances that we find when we practice. So what that means for us is what is effective on one side may not be effective on the other side. Now again, I suspect I'm still a ways away from reaching that point where I don't get a stretch at all. In this particular stretch here, I'm still able to get it, and it's still safe. But again, one day I might reach that point where no matter how hard I try, I don't get a satisfying stretch. If you don't like that, the simple solution is stop stretching and do some strengthening exercises, and those will bring tension back into the muscles. And depending on your age, you might do that surprisingly quickly. Now, having a lot of tension in your muscles isn't necessarily a desirable thing, so I'm not recommending that you do that. I'm just saying, though, if you really miss that stretching sensation, that would be something you could try. So for me, it makes somewhat some sense, because I've been emphasizing stretching recently in my, we all only have so many hours, right, a day, so we can't do everything. Wouldn't it be great if we could, you know, eat every meal as a home-cooked, organic, fresh, whole food meal, if every day we had time to stretch and every day to get out and, you know, work out. It's just not like that for anybody that I know personally. I suppose if you're independently wealthy or something, you can do that. But most of us have too much going on. So I like hiking a lot, but I haven't had as much time to hike. So I've been spending more time at home stretching, which is also what I feel like I personally have been needing. So it makes sense. Hiking would put tension back into the muscles. All right, let's go ahead and take our time coming out of that. I was being quite aggressive there, and I can feel that. Again, let's rest back for a moment. Give everything a break. All right, now we pull those legs in, stretch it out a bit, shake it out a bit. And then again, we'll hinge up to seated. Don't skip this step if you can avoid it, because again, that small activation, it can be quite powerful actually, especially when you add it up over time. Okay, next we will do a shoelace, and this is what's called adduction. So if you imagine these are my legs, right? What did we do? We pulled one leg out to the side and we bent the other one. We did that. So that's called abduction, when you pull something away. Now we want to do the opposite, adduction, okay? So it's going to look like that. Take that right knee over the left leg and then bring the other foot back alongside your hip and fold forward. Now this is difficult, and it is for certain body types. Then try it on your back. Just lay back and use your hands to pull the legs. Okay, now remember, right knee to the left, left knee to the right. That's the main thing. So it's not a pigeon. We do want to feel it out here, but it's different than pigeon because the knees are pointing across. Okay, pigeon, your knee points straight ahead or maybe out to the side. We're doing the opposite, where it's not straight ahead, it's angled toward the opposite side, okay? I mention that because sometimes when I teach this in person, I see some people, when they come on their back, they do what's called a figure 4. Similar, they're kind of in the right ballpark, and if all we were going for was a glute stretch, they would be right on the money, okay? But that isn't what we're doing here. We're trying to move the femur in addition to stretch the muscle group. So there are two considerations, not just one. So even though I might get a good glute stretch in figure 4, I'm not adducting my femur, which is one of our goals in the class today. I'm not going to use any props, but again, if you have them and you want to use them, feel free. A lot of people will put a block under their forehead for this. Some people put 2 blocks in their forearms. But remember, if you use too much support, you don't feel the stretch. Okay, you lose the stretch. You might be really comfy, but you're not really activating the right muscle group, which is, again, the other factor in what we're doing today. Okay, we're going to switch sides. This is called a shoelace. And the two things we're doing here is we are adducting the femur and we are stretching the glutes. Now, if you were to choose one, which one's more important today? I would say it's adducting the femur. So we have plenty of sequences where we target the glutes effectively. And while that's very beneficial, today I want you to focus more on the articulation of the bone. Okay. So again, we'll take a little rest before we continue. We have 2 more articulations. We've done 4 of 6. So let's just come on back and relax. We'll bring those legs in, give them a little squeeze, shake it off. And then let's hinge up. And then from there, we can transition. And we come back to where we started. So a little bit of the bear pose. Remember that movement, as long as it's safe, is just basically inherently good for you. So, if you're wondering, well, why should I move? I don't, want to move. I don't feel like moving. Just in general, as long as you're not overdoing it, then it's going to be good for you. So even these kind of gentle, not particularly difficult or complex movements, those are good for you. And then we can do some down dog. Good. Now we do sleeping swan. So this is what I was talking about earlier with the figure 4. Figure 4 is essentially this pose on your back. So the knee can point straight ahead or out to the side. Hips can rock to the left or the right. You can stay up on your hands or drop down to your elbows. Now the main thing today to think about is what you do with this foot. You can see this foot is back toward my hip, and that's because I don't have that much external rotation in my femur. So up here, there just isn't that much rotation out, which is what we're doing here. Okay, so that means if I bring my foot up here, let's say, that would, instead of stretching my hip, it would just go into my knee. Okay, and the knee is a weak link in the chain, so we don't want to mess with our knee, anything that's going to hurt the knee. And you'll feel it. It's not like I don't feel anything in my knee, but it's within what I know is safe for my knee. Okay, if I start to feel like a shooting kind of pain there, then that's probably not a good idea. Okay, so again, I'm going to come down to my forearms, and you should feel it right out here. Same area, but it's definitely a different sensation than the last posture. At least for me, it is. Okay, tabletop or down dog are good ways of switching sides. On this side, it might be a little easier to see what I was talking about. This foot, for me, is going to be here. Okay, you can flex or point the foot, either is fine. But some people, if you do yoga in a large class, you'll probably see some people with their shin is here, not here at an angle. The shin is here, the foot is here, level with the knee. What that's telling you is that person has quite a bit of external rotation. Some people have it, others don't. And if you have a lot of muscle tension in your body, then stretching may give you some more external rotation. For the vast majority of people, their external rotation is limited. So those people with quote unquote open hips like that, you see them when they sit cross-legged, their knees fall all the way to the ground. They are a minority of people. That's not most people. And when you see those people, the common, I think what a lot of people think who don't know about anatomy and these types of things, even some yoga people, even some yoga teachers, they think, wow, that person must have stretched a lot because look at how open their hips are. You can only open your hips as much as they will allow you to open them. So not having quote unquote open hips is partly muscle, which generally you can address relatively easily and relatively quickly. And then the other part is going to be the joints and the connective tissue and the shape of your bones. And you will not significantly change the shape of your bones with yoga. There's zero evidence that I've seen of this. So you may hear stories of people who say, oh, I was so tight and then I started stretching in yoga and now my hips are so open. But their bones had that potential. And what they released was tension in the soft tissues, the fascia and the muscles, which you can change. I don't think they changed their bones. Like I said, there really is no evidence that this is possible to do with stretching. So who knows? Anything's possible. Someone can show me if someone wants to do a study and show me evidence. Someone wants to show me x-rays of before and after and show how their bones have changed shape by stretching. I'm open to it. But I haven't seen any evidence other than somebody saying, oh, I used to be so tight and now I'm flexible, so anybody can do it. That's the mistake, thinking that anybody can do it. Not anybody can do it. You have to have the bones for it. All right, let's go ahead and come on out of that. The important thing I want you to understand is I don't have the bones for it. Most people don't. And the most important thing to understand is that has no bearing on your yoga practice. It does dictate certain variations in postures you will or won't be able to do, but those things are not important in the grand scheme of things. There is no magic yoga posture that we have to do that's going to enlighten us. So there's always other postures that we can use to access many things. All right, we have one more to do, so let's bring those legs in, shake it off. And then we'll hinge up. Okay, this last one can be tricky, so please pay attention and be very mindful, again, of your knee and your ankle. Okay, this is called external rotation. And so we fold this foot back like so, okay? Now, again, knee, foot. Be very mindful. Pad the foot and ankle if it needs it. If the knee hurts, try sitting on a block and maybe changing the angle. So a lot of times the knee out is easier, safer, more comfortable, okay? Now, today we're dealing with rotation. I want to rotate my femur in this direction. The way that I do that is by bringing this foot away from my hip. When your hip begins to lift, you're further than you need to be, okay? So for me, it's right around here. If I bring my foot out, I start to feel it in my knee. I don't want it in my knee, okay? Again, the reason I feel it in my knee and not my hip is this is a weaker joint. So about here, do I feel it in my hip? Not really. Am I rotating my femur? Yeah, I can see it. I am. What do I get by rotating my femur and moving my femur? I get to keep a healthier joint. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to make this joint healthy. All right, you can stay up here, or you can try lowering back slowly, carefully, maybe onto your hands, elbows, onto a bolster, or like me, maybe all the way back onto your back. Okay, now maybe you know someone with a hip replacement or 2 hip replacements, right? These are more and more common these days. What we like is to try and keep the joint healthy by stimulating it. Your body needs a few things to stay healthy, okay? One of those things is rest, which I already mentioned a little bit. In modern times, and when I say rest, that doesn't include watching Netflix. I mean, for your physically, it might. But when we talk about rest in yogic terms, it's a much deeper rest. It's a resting of the body and the mind. Now, sleep is important, but even sleep doesn't really count. So again, in your day or in your week, see if you can allocate some time for meditation, where you're just still and quiet for a few minutes. Nothing else is going on. If you want to know more about meditation, I have some videos up on my YouTube page. You can watch that. But meditation is an important aspect of that. Yoga Nidra is another example of a practice like that, where you're really allowing both the body and the mind to relax. Another important aspect, though, in keeping healthy is, again, going to be healthy stress. So the body is used to being used. And when it isn't used in the right way, often enough, long enough, then it starts to atrophy. It starts to get weak. It starts to get unhealthy. Our hips are one of the major areas where we see a lot of this happening in modern life. And again, the reason for this is we sit in chairs, and most of our day is spent in a chair. You might think that that's normal because you grew up in our culture, and that's what most people do. But human beings have been around for about 4 million years, and for most of that time, they didn't do that. So the body is not evolved to sit in a chair for hours and hours and hours. It won't anytime soon. It can take millions of years for evolutionary changes to show up. So in your lifetime, in my lifetime, in the lifetime of our great-great-grandchildren, they're going to still be dealing with the same stuff that we're dealing with. Okay, let's go ahead and change. So the human body and mind and nervous system are the most adaptable on the planet. Okay, look at any other animal species. You're not going to find an animal that is more adaptable than the human animal.
but there is still a limit to that adaptation. And when you reach that limit, you start becoming less healthy. And so there's a range in which human beings can be happy and healthy. Okay? And so at one end of the range is too much of anything. And at the other end of the range is too little of anything. Okay? And so that includes, again, movement, too much movement, problems. Okay, you start to wear things out. This is what athletes do. You might think athletes are very healthy. They aren't. They may be very be able to healthy in some respects, but they're wearing their parts out really quickly. And so a lot of them, when they get older, they end up with hip replacements and all kinds of things because of what they did in their youth. That's like burning the candle at both ends. That's what most athletes are doing. The other end of the spectrum, which is where most Americans live, is not enough. So most of us, we're not getting enough movement. We're not getting enough stretching. We're not using our hips enough. So this is where the yoga class comes in, doing stretching, moving, both this class and the one on Monday, all of that really, really good for us. As I've already mentioned in this class today, another aspect is rest. Okay? So again, one end of the spectrum, too much rest, right? Sleeping too much. They've done studies and they've shown that if you sleep more than 8 hours a day, it's a predictor of you having a shortened life. Now, they're not sure exactly why that is. They're not sure if it's causal or not, but just something to keep in mind. People who sleep a whole lot, they have a shortened, it seems like they have a shortened lifespan, okay? Not moving, again, this is very similar to what I talked about before. If I'm not moving enough, exercising, doing stuff, it's too much rest, right? That is a problem. And then at the other end of the spectrum, not enough rest. And again, it might seem like when you sit around watching Harry Potter or whatever it is that you like to do in your free time, that you're resting. And in a sense, you are. Physically, you're resting. Okay? Most Americans physically get enough rest. It's mentally and emotionally we don't get enough. And that's where meditation and yoga nidra are really important. They rest your heart and they rest your mind. And when I say heart, I mean your emotional, psychological being. Okay, let's unwind from that. Come onto your back, just relax. Okay, bringing those legs in. Shake it off, shake it out. And then we'll rest for a few minutes. So grab your phone, set a timer for 6 minutes is what I recommend. If you're chilly, just cover yourself with a blanket. Make yourself very comfortable laying down. You can put something under your knees if you'd like. And then just see if you can let your body be perfectly still for the next 6 minutes. Your mind might go crazy for a bit, and that's okay. What you find is if you allow your body to rest long enough, eventually the mind will follow if you don't get up and start doing something. So just use the next 6 minutes to be still and relax.